The night is quiet enough to hear your own breath, and in that quiet you can feel a pressure behind your ribs, a gentle ache, as if your future were knocking from the inside. You've tried to rush it. You've tried to bargain with it. You've tried to drown it in busyness, in advice, in noise. Yet the ache remains, because it isn't the ache of failure. It is the ache of something true in you that refuses to be postponed. Tonight, we will give that ache language. Tonight, we will place a lamp beside it and see what it has been asking for all along. You were told that wealth is speed, that wealth is luck, that wealth is what happens to other people when the door swings open at the right second. You were told to run faster, stack more, chase harder, scroll longer. Your mind learned the cadence of urgency, and your nervous system learned to brace. The body remembers the sprint even when the race is over. The shoulders creep upward, the jaw tightens, the breath goes shallow. You are not weak for feeling this. You are not broken for wanting rest. You are human, beautifully human, and your biology is not your enemy. It has simply been trained by a culture that confuses motion with increase. Under the noise, there is an older rhythm. It is not loud. It is not needy. It does not bargain. It simply speaks in patterns the soul already recognizes. Seed, time, harvest, wisdom, favor, flourishing, integrity, diligence, joy. You have heard these words before and perhaps dismissed them as quaint, but what if the ancient cadence is not quaint at all? What if it is the operating system that your life has craved? Order in place of panic, compounding in place of chaos, flow in place of fear. The mind wants novelty, the heart wants meaning, and the spirit wants truth. When these align, wealth ceases to be a number and becomes a capacity, a quiet strength that grows because it is governed by wisdom. Solomon stands at this intersection of desire and design, a voice from a distant century whose counsel has outlived empires. He does not shout, he does not sell, he does not promise spectacle. He names things that are already true and asks you to live as if truth were reliable. He speaks to the part of you that is tired of gambling with your peace. He speaks to the part of you that senses prosperity is not a storm to be caught, but a climate to be cultivated. When he says that wisdom is better than gold, he is not romanticizing poverty. He is ordering the sequence. Gold follows wisdom the way rivers seek the sea. Change the sequence, and you exhaust yourself chasing what would have come if you had learned to flow. Keep the sequence, and your hands become trustworthy places for increase to land. Let us speak plainly and with kindness. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not disqualified by the years you spent in distraction or the seasons you spent in survival. The brain monitors threat with admirable devotion. It is quick to memorize pain and slow to trust safety. That is not a moral failure. That is neurobiology doing its job. Yet wisdom invites the prefrontal mind, the part of you that can plan and choose and direct, to sit at the table with your vigilant amygdala and say, "Thank you for keeping me safe. Now let us learn a rhythm that grows me, not just a rhythm that protects me. When fear is honored but not obeyed, it quiets. When truth is practiced, not merely admired, it rewires. Repetition becomes mercy. Small, faithful actions teaching the body that increase can be calm. Perhaps you have tried to leap into a new life. Perhaps the leap felt brave and cinematic for a while, until the ground rushed up and the old patterns reclaimed you because they were familiar, and familiar feels safe even when it is costly. Tonight, we will not leap. We will walk. We will walk in sentences that your nervous system can receive, in practices your day can hold, in a cadence your soul recognizes. We will bless the long path, not because slowness is virtuous, but because rootedness is powerful. The tree that lasts is not the tree that grows loud. It is the tree that grows deep, then wide, then fruit. You may be asking, what do you mean by wealth? And what do you mean by infinite? Let us define gently and clearly so your heart can relax into the journey. By wealth, we mean the increasing capacity to create, to steward, to bless, to build, to enjoy and to repair. Resources of money, certainly, but also of wisdom, reputation, relationships, and righteousness. By infinite, We do not mean endless accumulation or restless hoarding. We mean a principled, renewable flow, a system designed to compound because it moves according to order, not impulse. This is not a lottery. This is a liturgy. This is not a windfall. This is a watershed. When the channels are rightly cut, the water keeps finding you, not because you chased it, but because you prepared a path. There are guardrails, and they are good. We do not violate conscience to gain advantage. We do not trade peace for spectacle. We do not mortgage tomorrow's integrity for today's applause. We do not measure growth by noise. We do not confuse generosity with weakness or excellence with vanity. Wisdom is not a loophole. Wisdom is a law. Within those guardrails there is joy, and within that joy the work becomes lighter because it is aligned. If a tactic contradicts your values, it is not your tactic. If a shortcut corrodes your relationships, it is not your road. This is firm and it is compassionate because boundaries do not punish you. They protect your future from your momentary fear. You will hear hard truths in the next minutes, and every one of them will arrive with a hand on your shoulder, not a finger in your face. You will be asked to release the rush that kept you busy and empty. You will be invited to trade spectacle for structure, urgency for order, envy for stewardship. This is not an indictment of your past. It is an invitation to a wiser sequence. You can breathe here, you can learn here, you can decide here. When the soul understands the pattern, the body stops bracing and starts building. I will not promise you magic. I will not perform secrets as if they were tricks. I will show you patterns that are old enough to be trusted and precise enough to be practiced. We will honor the quiet strength that grows in seasons, the leverage that rises from character, the access that follows excellence, the favor that flows through generosity. We will move from concept to cadence, from insight to implementation, from wanting to working. And as we move, you will notice something simple and profound. Peace will stop visiting and start staying. And where peace stays, capacity grows. If a part of you feels skeptical, let it sit beside a part of you that feels hopeful and let them listen together. Skepticism protects you from naivete. Hope protects you from despair. Wisdom holds both by teaching you to test a pattern with your life. Test it small. Test it daily, test it honestly. Let repetition become your ally. Let order become your language. Let your days stop arguing with each other and begin to cooperate. This is how the anxious mind exhale by habit. This is how the scattered heart feels gathered without force. As we step into the teaching, remember this simple grace. You are allowed to start again without dramatics. You are allowed to build quietly. You are allowed to prosper without apology. You are allowed to be ethical and expansive at the same time. The formula is not a spell, it is a sequence. The sequence is ancient, the application is modern. The result is growth with a clean conscience. Breathe once more. Feel the shoulders lower. Feel the pace slow without losing momentum. In that posture, you are ready, not to chase what keeps running, but to become someone increase, can trust. There is a rhythm that lives beneath the rush, and it is older than every shortcut you have ever been sold. It moves like breath, like sunrise, like tides that do not argue with the moon. Seed, time, harvest. Not as slogan, not as superstition, but as a quiet architecture that turns effort into increase without demanding that your soul burn to ash. When life is forced to sprint, the mind learns panic. When life is allowed to root, the mind learns trust. Panic spends. Trust compounds. You know the fatigue of chasing hacks, the late nights that feel like a chase scene, the tabs open like alarms, the heart drumming a warning your schedule ignores. Urgency becomes a habit, then a habitat. The body adapts. Cortisol becomes a soundtrack. Sleep turns thin. Attention shatters into glitter. And still, the increase stays skittish, as if money itself could sense the tremor in your hands. It is not that you have been lazy. It is that you have been asked to harvest what was never seeded and to rush what needs time. Solomon's wisdom slows the frame until the pattern comes into view. First, a seed, small, specific, alive with hidden design. Then time, not empty waiting, but the season in which roots choose the dark, so that branches can one day choose the light. Finally, harvest, not a miracle thrown at the undeserving, but a ripening that respects the order that produced it. This order is not a cage, it is a channel. Water within a channel moves farther, touches more fields, and still returns generous. So does effort when it flows through sequence. The culture teaches another order: hoard first, sprint always, harvest now. Hoarding feels safe when the world feels sharp. Hoarding promises protection. It offers a vault when what you needed was a river. But sealed jars grow stale. Sealed hearts grow suspicious. Sealed lives grow small. Flow feels risky until you remember that granaries were built beside fields, not instead of them. Storage supports seasons, it cannot replace them. Rivers nourish cities because they move. Here is the expectation that breaks the fever. It is not speed that multiplies, it is consistency. Value planted without spectacle, value planted when nobody is clapping, value planted as if tomorrow depended less on drama and more on rhythm. This is the value that compounds. Hoarding stalls flow because fear makes you clutch what should be circulating, and circulation is how opportunity finds you. The closed hand keeps what it has. The open system grows what it is. When the pattern is honored, increase stops behaving like a rumor and starts behaving like a law. The practical cost of ignoring this order is familiar. Volatile income, brittle confidence, a calendar swollen with effort and thin on harvest. Opportunities pass unrecognized because panic narrows vision. The eyes scan for threat, not for alignment. The brain's vigilance is trying to love you, but vigilance cannot plan a season. It can only survive a night. Without seed and without time, the harvest requires luck, and luck is a poor manager of a life you care about. With seed and with time, luck becomes less relevant. The soil begins to carry you. Imagine yourself not as a treasure guard counting coins in a dim room, but as a steward farmer reading weather and soil with calm attention. A steward thinks in cycles. A steward respects beginnings that look small and middles that look quiet. The world can call it slow. A steward calls it faithful. The work is not frantic. The work is rhythmic. The hands do not clutch. The hands arrange. The calendar becomes a field, planted with acts of value that ask for water, for patience, for watchfulness, not for spectacle. Emotional life learns the rhythm as well. The nervous system, once trained to expect emergency, begins to mirror the ground it tends. Repetition teaches safety. Safety frees focus. Focus refines craft. Craft raises value. This is not mystical. This is merciful. When the prefrontal mind stops negotiating with panic and starts partnering with pattern, decisions simplify. Not yet becomes wisdom, not deprivation. It is time becomes discernment, not impulse. The body listens and eases. The breath deepens. The work becomes inhabitable. Think of granaries and rivers. Granaries keep the story of past seasons, so future seasons do not starve. Rivers keep the future flexible by connecting fields that could never meet if the water refused to move. Store what steadies you, flow what grows you. Keep what allows planted value to survive drought. Release what allows planted value to multiply. The art is not in choosing one over the other. The art is in keeping both faithful to the order that makes them generous. Seed, time, harvest. This cadence is not naive about uncertainty. Seeds fail. Weather turns. Pests test patience. Yet the order itself does not lie. Across seasons, across trials, across the quiet and the costly, the pattern keeps returning value to those who return to the pattern. Effort without order exhausts. Effort inside order accumulates. The difference is felt first in the heart, a settling, a gathering, and then seen in the life, a steadiness that others call luck because they have not watched you honor time. You may remember seasons when you planted and saw nothing, and resentment took root where hope should have stayed. That memory is tender. It deserves kindness. Time is not silence. Time is chemistry. Much happens in the dark that the surface cannot applaud. Roots negotiate with stone. Fibers thicken. Resilience is fabricated, filament by filament. Harvest is public because it must be gathered, but growth is private because it must be built. Trusting that privacy is not denial, it is discipline married to faith. As this order sinks from idea to instinct, the mind stops demanding immediate returns as proof of worth. Worth no longer stands trial every evening. The measure shifts from "how much did I get today?" to "what did I plant that the future can trust?" The day becomes a participant in a lineage rather than a standalone audition. Anxiety loses a little of its vocabulary. Envy loses some of its urgency. What once felt like deprivation begins to feel like design. And in that design, the future becomes less threatening, not because life goes easy, but because life goes ordered. The hands that once shook begin to steady when they touch the work. The eyes that once scanned for comparison begin to scan for timing. The voice inside that once rehearsed failure begins to rehearse faithfulness. Seed, time, harvest. The words stop being a banner and become a body rhythm. The field answers, the river answers, the granary answers. Increase learns your name because you have learned its language. Before numbers, there is a foundation you can feel, a quiet strength in the chest, a steadiness in the gaze, a goodness you do not have to explain. Call it a climate. Call it a current. Call it the atmosphere where increase feels safe enough to stay. Solomon names its pillars with the calm of someone who has watched palaces rise and fall. Wisdom, reputation, relationships, righteousness. Gold glitters, but pillars carry the roof. When the storm comes and the crowd scatters, it is the pillars that decide whether the house keeps breathing. Wisdom moves first, not cleverness, not novelty. Wisdom is the ability to read reality without lying to yourself about what you want it to be. It is pattern recognition married to moral clarity. It keeps the prefrontal mind awake when adrenaline begs for shortcuts, and it trains the amygdala to stand down when threat is exaggerated by old memories. Wisdom edits the sequence of a life until cause and effect begin to cooperate. Think, then choose. Choose, then act. Act, then review. Review, then refine. When Solomon says wisdom is better than gold, he is speaking about leverage that survives the market's mood. Where wisdom grows, waste shrinks. Where wisdom speaks, chaos loses vocabulary. Reputation follows like a soft light in a long hallway. It cannot be bought, it can only be built. And the material is time. Reputation is not public relations. It is public memory. It is the echo of choices, repeated long enough for people to relax around your name. Neuroscience knows this as familiarity calming vigilance. The nervous system of others learns, slowly and gratefully, that your presence lowers danger. Doors open because nervous systems open. In rooms where no one owes you anything, reputation pays your way without currency. Relationships take that trust and give it faces. Not contacts arranged like trophies, but people who can breathe near you without holding armor to their chest. In the economy of a life, relationships are bridges that carry weight both directions. They multiply information, shorten time, and soften the blows that would break a solitary traveler. In hard seasons, their eyes say, "Stay." In brave seasons, their hands say, "Go." The brain is built for co-regulation. The body steadies when a steady person enters the room. Where relationships are rich, decisions do not exhaust you because counsel shares the load. Righteousness holds the entire structure to the earth, not performance, not self-righteousness. Righteousness is alignment between what you know to be right and what you actually do when pressure leans in. It is integrity measured in private. It is promises honored when no one is keeping score. It is the refusal to make profit out of someone else's confusion. The soul rests when righteousness governs, and rest is not passivity. Rest is power stored. Money can be loud around unrighteousness, but it is skittish. It arrives quickly and leaves faster. Money around righteousness lingers because it recognizes a house where it will not be used as an alibi. The mistake that hurts the most is thinking money is the first capital. Money is a follower. Money is a signal that the other capitals have been cultivated. It moves toward wisdom because waste scares it. It moves toward reputation because risk hates opacity. It moves toward relationships because opportunity travels along trust. It moves toward righteousness because corruption burns the very bridges that profit must cross. Put money first, and the sequence fractures. Put money later, and the sequence strengthens. There is a kind of pain that comes from ignoring these pillars. High income, low leverage, impressive revenue, fragile access, projects that sparkle and then stall because people nodded at your pitch but did not want to build with you, doors that should have opened but stayed closed because the hallway could not trust your footsteps. The calendar fills and the heart empties. Exhaustion tries to purchase shortcuts and ends up buying problems. It is not a moral failure to land in this place. It is simply evidence that sequence matters and that the soul is asking for a different order. Imagine a palace courtyard at dawn. 4 pillars hold the weight of a roof that shelters work, welcomes counsel, and frames a view of the horizon. Wisdom is the architect's drawing that prevents expensive regret. Reputation is the fragrance of cedar that says the builder did not cut corners. Relationships are the corridors connecting chambers so voices can find each other. Righteousness is the foundation that does not crack when the sun is fierce and the night is freezing. Gold leaf catches light on the walls, but if the pillars fail, the glitter becomes rubble. Pillars first, ornament later. Emotional life answers this order with relief. When wisdom begins to govern, the body lowers its shoulders because chaos is not driving. When reputation precedes you, the social brain stops bracing for exile. When relationships encircle you, isolation loosens its grip on your attention. When righteousness anchors you, shame has fewer angles to hide in. The nervous system learns a new baseline: steady, attentive, available. From that baseline, creativity is less frantic, risk is less reckless, and prosperity feels less like a chase and more like a collaboration. Consider the quiet math unfolding beneath the surface. Wisdom reduces error, which increases margins. Reputation reduces friction, which increases speed without rushing. Relationships reduce blind spots, which increases accuracy. Righteousness reduces entropy, which preserves gains. Each pillar multiplies money's effectiveness before money arrives. Each pillar protects money's presence after it comes. This is why the order out-earns cash. The pillars work while you sleep because they live in other people's minds and in your own muscle memory. Doors are respectful things. They open for skill they can trust, for character they can relax around, for names that have kept their word over time. Where pillars are thin, doors become polite but distant. Where pillars thicken, doors begin to act like invitations. Gatekeepers are not always stingy. Many are simply careful. They listen for the sound of pillars in your voice. They look for the lines of integrity in your choices. They wait to see if the atmosphere around you is safe for the people on the other side. There is a tenderness inside all this talk of pillars. It remembers the seasons when your best was small, when your name was new, when your courage shook. It remembers the missteps and the corrections, the apologies made, and the promises kept the next time. Pillars do not grow under applause. They grow under practice. They do not appear overnight. They appear over seasons, and yet once they stand for a very long time, carrying weight so your joy can carry other things. Gold shines, pillars hold. In the story Solomon tells, the shine is allowed, but it is not trusted with the roof. When the capitals are arranged in this order, wisdom shaping decisions, reputation walking ahead, relationships weaving strength, righteousness grounding everything, money stops behaving like a visitor and becomes part of the household. It comes through the gate without drama and finds its place at the table without fear. And in that calm interior, the next movement of prosperity begins to make sense. Expansion that does not gamble with the roof, growth that does not bargain with the foundation, ventures that step out like ships from a safe harbor. There is a harbor inside your life, quiet in the early light, masts sketching thin lines against a silver sky. In that harbor, one ship looks grand and confident, paint fresh, hull gleaming, crew uniformed in hope. The heart wants to believe this single vessel can outrun every storm and return with cargo enough to change the story in one heroic voyage. The heart is brave, but the sea is not sentimental. Solomon stands at the quay with an older wisdom and points, not to the shine of one ship, but to the horizon crisscrossed with many routes, not a lottery ticket, a fleet. Fear tells a different story. Fear says concentration is safety, that standing on one deck means control, that watching one horizon means fewer surprises. The nervous system loves this illusion because vigilance prefers a single point of focus. Loss aversion whispers that spreading effort is wasteful, that multiple ventures dilute attention, that small boats are insults to big dreams. Yet the body that clings to one rail learns tension as a posture, and the mind that bets on one wind calls every breeze a verdict. Volatility seeps into the bones because the whole future is balancing on one keel. Solomon's counsel feels less glamorous and infinitely kinder. Patient diversification. Send several ships on different waters in different seasons with different cargo. Not chaos, not frantic activity disguised as strategy. A portfolio of seeds launched with thoughtfulness, reviewed with rhythm, allowed to mature without the poison of panic. The prefrontal mind steadies this pattern. It maps risk across time instead of compressing it into a single moment. The amygdala settles when it learns that no single outcome has permission to define the whole story. All-in bets masquerade as courage, but they often spring from exhaustion or despair. Endlessly stacking hustles masquerades as ambition, but it often hides a fear of stillness where wisdom would speak. A fleet is different. A fleet respects capacity. A fleet honors sequence. A fleet allows one ship to be young while another is seasoned, one to be fast while another is patient, one to explore new coasts while another travels a trusted trade wind. In that arrangement, disappointment becomes data, not doom. The loss of one cargo does not ransom your peace. The cost of ignoring this is not theoretical. It is the ache many carry in their sleep. One shock sinks everything. A contract ends. A platform changes its rules. A market sighs, and the single ship tilts into cold water. What follows is not only financial loss, but identity tremor. The body forgets how to unclench. The calendar fills with reaction, and the mind rehearses worst-case futures as if rehearsal could make them kinder. The soul is not weak in this moment. It is simply overexposed. A fleet would have shared the wind. There is a grace in thinking like a portfolio of seeds. Each seed knows it is not the whole field. Each vessel knows it is not the whole navy. The psyche relaxes when responsibility is distributed. Creativity returns when pressure is not total. Small endeavors stop apologizing for their size and start honoring their role. Modest projects that renew quickly, mid-range ventures that deepen skill and reputation, long horizon builds that ask for seasons, all belong. The multiplicity is not noise, it is harmony across tempos. Consider a quiet story from the lives around you. Someone kept a steady roll that covered the roof and the table. Alongside it, a weekly letter left the harbor at dawn, with ideas packed in plain crates. Most weeks the sea was calm. Some weeks a storm soaked the pages, and over time readers gathered on far shores. A small digital tool pushed off at midday, simple and sturdy. It learned the coastline and brought home steady grain. A partnership launched at twilight, slower and heavier. It took longer to return. But when it did, the decks were lined with timber strong enough to build rooms into the future. No single voyage made them rich. The fleet made them durable. Neuroscience holds a lantern to this wisdom. Distributed risk interrupts the brain's habit of catastrophic thinking. It lowers the amplitude of stress responses because no single variable holds too much power. The prefrontal cortex can plan when cortisol is not screaming, and planning is how skill, reputation, and access compound beneath the surface. Decision quality rises when fear is moderated, and with better decisions, the same effort begins to produce different outcomes. The heart senses this and stops begging for miracles. It begins to trust compounding. Ships on many waters is more than poetry. It is a posture. Morning and evening become invitations to continuity rather than threats of not enough time. Morning may carry a short route task that harvests soon. Evening may tend a long route vessel that teaches patience. Some days the wind favors one sail. Another day it turns and blesses a different mast. The harbor master inside you, steady, attentive, unhurried, learns to watch weather without superstition and to name progress without spectacle. There is a humility in this model that protects the soul from vanity and the wallet from ruin. It accepts that no one can perfectly predict which voyage will return first, which current will accelerate a hull, which fog will delay landfall. It answers uncertainty, not with paralysis, but with proportional exposure. When probability is honored, fragility decreases. When fragility decreases, generosity increases, because survival stops consuming every breath. The fleet becomes not only a mechanism of growth, but also a means of peace. The gambler asks the sea for a miracle and curses the sky when clouds gather. The king studies currents, honors seasons, equips crews, spreads cargo, and blesses departure with a calm face. One seeks drama, the other seeks durability. The difference is not just strategy, it is character shaped by sequence. Where this character grows, money approaches slowly, stays longer, and behaves better. It recognizes a harbor that will not panic when the fog closes in, a captain who respects limits, a map that includes more than one line. In this light, small beginnings stop feeling like insults. They become scouts. Modest profits stop feeling like failures. They become signals. Setbacks stop feeling like verdicts. They become weather reports handed to a wiser navigator. The story quiets. The body loosens. The horizon expands. You are no longer pleading with one ship to be magnificent. You are learning to be a harbor where many ships become faithful, and faithful over seasons becomes fruitful. Some rooms change the air the moment you cross the threshold. The light feels cleaner, the sound softens, decision lives at the table, and time behaves differently because the people inside it do. Many wander the outer halls of such rooms, knocking in louder and louder rhythms, believing noise translates into entry. The soul grows hoarse, the calendar grows crowded, the heart mistakes fatigue for fate, yet the doors in these corridors are not persuaded by volume, they are persuaded by signals, quiet, persistent, unmistakable signals that announce excellence and visible usefulness long before a hand reaches the handle. Hard work matters, and still many who labor deeply remain unseen. The myth says, effort alone is a lighthouse. The reality is gentler and more precise. Effort without refinement blurs into the background of a noisy world. Refined skill rises from the same sea like a fixed star. The difference is not vanity, it is accuracy. Excellence concentrates value until it becomes legible at a distance. It is work that has been reviewed by reality often enough to carry its own credentials. And when usefulness is easy to see, gatekeepers relax because the mind loves clarity more than persuasion. There is an ache that comes from invisibility. The ache of speaking sense into a headwind, the ache of making something good and watching it evaporate where no eyes were looking. The nervous system learns to brace for indifference. The amygdala prepares for dismissal with a speed that startles. Cortisol becomes a familiar aftertaste. Compassion meets this ache first because shame only deepens it. Then comes wisdom with a soft torch. Excellence that is refined and placed where it can be received becomes access, not as favor begged, but as alignment recognized. Emotional neuroscience sketches the pathway. Deliberate practice thickens myelin around the circuits that execute a craft. Repetition tames noise. Precision becomes a habit rather than a performance. The salience network in other people's brains lights up when a clear signal appears. a result delivered, a pattern explained, a problem dissolved with economy. The social brain, always scanning for risk, finds itself soothed by competence, married to character. This is why the proverb travels centuries. A skilled person finds themselves before kings, not by accident, but by signal. Excellence in this sense is not perfectionism with a better outfit. Perfectionism anxiously polishes surfaces to ward off rejection. Excellence refines the core, so outcomes become trustworthy. Perfectionism burns energy on appearances. Excellence conserves energy for impact. Perfectionism hides because nothing feels ready. Excellence emerges because readiness has been built into the bones of the work. When the inner standard and the outer result finally agree, the body stops arguing with itself. Breath returns to depth. Presence returns to the room. Visibility is the second half of this path, and often the gentler challenge to the soul. Many who love the craft resist the stage. The stage feels risky. The stage triggers old memories of being looked at and misread. Yet visibility here is not performance, it is placement. It is the careful setting of a finished thing in a context where its usefulness can be seen by those who need it. The mind may call this self-promotion. The wiser part names it stewardship. What serves deserves to be findable. What solves deserves to be locatable. When usefulness hides, suffering looks elsewhere, and doors cannot open to what they cannot see. The quiet tragedy of believing hard work alone gets noticed is a life spent beneath a ceiling that keeps lowering. The ceiling lowers because rooms of impact are not just occupied by the talented, they are curated by those who can read and trust signals. A portfolio that shows progression, an artifact that makes the invisible method visible, a result that can be examined from multiple angles without collapsing. These are signals. In the right corridor, they travel faster than introductions. They turn strangers into witnesses, and witnesses into allies. There is a way the heart softens when excellence becomes a form of hospitality rather than a test. Hospitality says, enter. Here is clarity. Here is care. Here is something crafted with your need in mind. In this light, excellence stops striving to be admired and begins to serve to be understood. The recipient's nervous system senses the difference. Admiration demands energy. Understanding returns it. Doors are predisposed to offerings that give energy back to the room. The image of the craftsman before the throne is not a fantasy of status. It is an illustration of fit. Thrones require solutions that will not embarrass the day's decisions. The craftsperson stands there because the work has already proven that it will hold underweight. In the halls of consequence, the question beneath every question is simple. Will this hold? Where refined skill and visible usefulness answer yes with evidence, access is not a favor. It is the next step in a sequence already in motion. This pathway honors the body's thresholds. When excellence deepens, anxiety lessens. Not because attention disappears, but because attention learns to rest on competence it recognizes. When usefulness is visible, social threat diminishes. The brain predicts fewer rejections. Resilience rises without theatrics. This is the interior economy that underwrites exterior access. It is less dramatic than the story of a sudden break and far more stable. It is less cinematic than a meteoric rise and far more repeatable. A signature competence begins to form within this process, a way of solving that carries your fingerprints without needing your face in every frame. It is a synthesis of choices that turns into a method that turns into outcomes that turn into trust. Trust becomes a road, and roads lead to gates. The old ceiling begins to feel like a chapter rather than a fate. Rooms that once seemed improbable begin to sound familiar because their language, clarity, reliability, grace under pressure, matches the language of your craft. And in those rooms, presence matters. Not charisma that exhausts itself trying to glow, but presence that calms the temperature because it has nothing to prove. Presence that listens without shrinking. Presence that speaks without decoration. Presence that lets the work do the heavy lifting. Decision makers are human. They carry fear, fatigue and responsibility in equal measure. The person who brings steady competence wrapped in quiet usefulness is felt as relief. Relief is a rare gift in high rooms. Relief is remembered. The soul may still worry that excellence is a ladder to arrogance. The worry is understandable and honorable, yet the character that shaped the work is the same character that will carry it. Righteousness keeps the spine straight, while humility keeps the heart open. Reputation walks a few steps ahead and prepares the air. Relationships encircle and translate. Wisdom measures when to speak and when silence adds weight. In that company, excellence does not swell, it serves. And when it serves, gates do what gates were made to do, they open. There is a sound the heart makes when it unclenches, a soft release, almost like a door that was swollen by weather finding its fit again. Scarcity tightens that hinge. Scarcity narrows breath, quickens glances, teaches the hands to close, as if safety lived in the fist. The culture praises the grip, calls it prudence, frames it as maturity. Yet the soul knows the difference between wisdom and fear. It feels the dryness that comes when channels are sealed. Solomon names a different logic, unhurried and counterintuitive. Open hands are not leaks. Open hands are irrigation. The field that waters others is itself watered. Not because of superstition, but because flow creates capacity that storage cannot. The body remembers seasons when giving felt dangerous. The paycheck thinned, the calendar groaned. The world shouted with 1,000 appetites, and each one felt like a mouth at your door. In those days, withholding felt like oxygen. You told yourself you were stabilizing the system, and sometimes you were. There are winters where granaries save lives. Yet something quieter also happened. Isolation began to grow in the shadow of caution. Networks cooled. Trust retreated. Opportunities, those living things that travel along human connection, paused at the edge of your name and kept walking. Not punishment, physics. Generosity in Solomon's frame is not the theater of largesse. It is the architecture of flow. Water that moves remains clear. Water that is trapped turns on itself. Money is not the only current in this river. Time moves. Attention moves. Praise moves, counsel moves, open channels let many currents pass, and those currents change the terrain they touch. A note of encouragement placed where fatigue had settled loosens a problem that would have stayed stuck. A small introduction between two honest people becomes a bridge you could not have built alone. A shared resource turns friction into ease and ease into momentum. Flow multiplies because flow connects. The nervous system recognizes this multiplication in ways the calculator cannot capture. Oxytocin rises when we engage in trustworthy generosity. Vagal tone steadies. The sense of threat softens around the edges. The mind thinks more clearly when it is not fighting for air. Creativity lifts its head. Generosity in this light is not expensive performance. It is an intervention that calms the body and sharpens the mind. When fear spends less adrenaline, decisions improve. When decisions improve, the same effort begins to produce outcomes that once seemed miraculous. The sequence is subtle: open, calm, see, act, multiply. Fear insists that giving makes you smaller. Experience, interpreted with wisdom, answers that giving makes you spacious. Spaciousness is not waste. Spaciousness is capacity. The heart that practices flow can receive without panic because receiving no longer threatens identity. The mind that practices flow can release without resentment because release no longer threatens survival. Rooms begin to feel less like markets where you must bargain and more like gardens where you can tend. And as the interior changes, the exterior answers. People remember where they felt seen. People return to places that return them to themselves. There is also a sober edge to this wisdom. Generosity without discernment exhausts. Rivers need banks. Channels need gates. Flow that refuses form floods fields it meant to nourish. The compassion of Solomon's counsel is not careless, it is crafted. Alignment matters, motive matters, proportion matters. When giving is calibrated to truth rather than to guilt, it ceases to be self-erasure and becomes stewardship. It invests in people and projects that are ready for rain, not in schemes that drink without ever carrying water forward. The heart can feel this difference. It is the difference between depletion and joy. Consider the social math that unfolds when open hands become a habit. Favors begin to orbit your name, not as a ledger, but as a living memory. Someone mentions a problem in a room you are not in, and your name rises because you once sent a resource at the right moment. Someone else meets a threshold and needs a quiet vouch. Your quiet reliability becomes their bridge. Networks do not reward noise, they reward nourishment. Over time, the circle around you thickens with people who can count on you, and this thickness is not sentimental, it is structural. Access moves on trust. Trust grows where water has flowed. Scarcity, left unanswered, creates a different topology. The channels silt up. The air in conversations grows thin. Others sense the subtle calculus in your eyes and withhold their own rivers out of self-protection. Invitations shrink to the size of transactions. Rooms that once felt alive begin to feel like waiting areas, where every face is scanning for advantage. This is not a moral failure to be shamed. It is a signal that the map needs redrawing. Without flow, even victories feel brittle, because their weight has nowhere to go. Generosity is also a teacher of sequence. It reminds the mind that value precedes validation. It trains the heart to act from identity rather than hunger. A person who knows they can create value and release it without vanishing is a person the future learns to trust. Opportunities prefer such houses. They are less likely to be suffocated by need and more likely to be nurtured by clarity. In this climate, reputation deepens without performance, relationships warm without choreography, and righteousness stands taller because there are fewer compromises to justify. There is a quiet joy in becoming the kind of place where good things pass through. It is felt in the shoulders before it is counted in the ledger. It is seen in the way conversations lengthen because people no longer flinch. It is overheard in the laughter that returns to meetings that had grown mechanical. It is measured not in applause, but in the rate at which problems turn into projects and projects turn into shared wins. This joy is not naive. It has room for grief and limits and knows. It does not pretend that everyone will reciprocate. It simply refuses to let ingratitude write the policy of the soul. The image of irrigation holds. Channels are cut with intention. Gates open and close with wisdom. Fields drink and return grain to the granary that will sustain the next season. The land grows generous because it has been taught a way to breathe. Winter still comes, but winter meets a people who prepared it with shared abundance rather than solitary stockpiles. When storms arrive, they find bridges already in place, hands already acquainted with the weight of helping, systems already practiced in moving resources toward need. In the story of increase, generosity is not the epilogue. It is in the blueprint. It is the reason gains do not become gods, and the reason success does not become a small prison lined with soft things. It keeps the heart free to bless without bargaining, to build without trembling, to enjoy without clutching. In a world that mistakes withholding for wisdom and spectacle for strength, open hands are a quiet revolution. They say there is enough for the work we are called to, enough for the people entrusted to us, enough for the future that asks us to be larger than fear. The return of water to the one who pours is not magic. It is the long feedback loop of a life arranged for flow. Open hands meet open doors because the ecosystems around them have learned that resources do not get trapped there. The universe is not an ATM. It is a garden of consequences. And generosity plants seeds that bloom in directions you could not have scripted. When the harvest comes, it is sweeter for having passed through many hands. When the harvest delays, the soul is steadier for having stayed generous along the way. What began as a trembling experiment becomes a temperament. What felt risky becomes restful. What looked like loss becomes leverage. the kind of leverage that does not bruise. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the story of your life sounds different to you. It sounds like water finding its level. It sounds like channels singing after rain. It sounds like a name that other names trust. Open hands fill faster because they were never empty. They were always connected to a river.